evening. Welcome. I am Humberto Ramirez. I'm the chair of the art department, and it is my distinct pleasure and privilege to introduce to you this evening Thomas More. Thomas, as most of you know, needs very little of an introduction. He's a very well-known and recognized author. Author of books that I think are not only important books, but actually books that have consistently, I think, through the years, changed, if not transformed people's lives. In that regard, Tom has, I think, distinguished himself by always being very invested in his desire to bring those two notions, right, that are not necessarily always in harmony. The secular and the religious, the mind, spirit, and the body. He would like us to believe, and he's very persuasive about this, I should say, that it is actually in our interest to bring those two forces into this whole, that in this a holistic, if you will, understanding of the self. There is a form of coming into being that is obviously not there when we are fractured and compartmentalized in our lives. Tom will speak, I think, tonight about many things, and perhaps hopefully he will touch a little bit in regards to his recent book, A Religion of One's Own. It's been reviewed very well, and there will be books for you if you're interested in buying books in the lobby, and he will be signing those as well at the end of the talk. So without much of a delay, here's Thomas.
Hello, everybody. It's wonderful being here in New Hampshire. I mean, this is... I was hoping you'd throw something at me when I said that. It's a great delight to have Humberto introduce me here. We have been friends for a long time, and I admire his works, his art so much, and his ideas especially. I mean, I just love it to have someone take art so seriously. And you won't find someone, I think, and I don't know anyone who takes it so seriously, but in a very joyous way as Humberto. So I appreciate very much us being together here. Before I speak about the subject at hand, which I'm still trying to figure out, I'm still trying to decide which talk to give you. I thought I'd open with a story, which I usually do. I like to tell the Sufi stories that a lot of you know, but it's good to hear them again. I usually advise audiences to pretend that you've never heard them before and hear them as if for the first time. So there's a story of Nasruddin, who is this mullah, this teacher, holy man, who is the object of hundreds of these stories that are told, have been told for centuries. And one day he's in this village and in his home with his wife, and he wakes up in the morning and discovers that his holy book is missing. His Quran is missing. And he's very distressed by this. So he tells his wife, my book is gone. I don't have my book. What has happened? And they go looking everywhere in their small house for it, and he doesn't find it. So he goes out into the village, and he tells everybody in his village that his book is missing, and everyone is out looking for it. He's still full of distress. And just then, a goat comes in from the countryside, and it has a book in his mouth. And one of the villagers goes up to the goat and grabs the book and says, Nasruddin, this is your book. This is your Quran that was missing. And Nasruddin looks at it and realizes it is his book, and he says, it's a miracle. It's a miracle. And the goat says, not really, your name was on the cover. And that's my theme. Our holy book, your name is on the cover. It's yours. It's yours. It doesn't belong to anybody else. So what I think I'm going to do then this evening is talk about two things. I really want to talk about, to students here especially, about how to prepare yourself to live a meaningful life. Small topic. And I also wanted to talk about my new book, A Religion of One's Own. I think I can do both, so I'm going to give that a try. So about religion. My idea is pretty simple. I feel that we have lived for many centuries thinking of religion as that organization or system that we join, that we give ourselves to, and we listen to what their representatives tell us. They tell us how to live and how to think, what our values should be. And it seems to me it's pretty clear that our culture is changing so much that we are no longer capable of submitting ourselves that way. Not everybody, of course, and everyone's at a different place here. I understand that. But in my travels, and I've been traveling a lot, I'm hearing from many angry people, people who are angry at their religious traditions, angry. Not everybody, but many people are. And I also hear, largely from parents, that their children are simply not interested in religion anymore. So there is a drift away from religion as we have known it. You may not like it, I may not like it, but it's happening, it is. And I would like to respond to that drift, because I happen to love religion. I was advised by my publishers not to use the word religion in this book, the title of this book. They said, why don't you call it a spiritual path of your own? And I said, because it doesn't have the sting that I want. It doesn't have the juice in it. Because what I want to suggest is that there is a way to do religion that is not the old way. There's a new way to do it. Now, it's complicated. I'm not at all suggesting that we get rid of or go away from the religious traditions. In fact, I think that if we go the direction that I'm pointing toward, we will respect and appreciate the religious traditions more than ever. More than ever. But we will think of them differently. If we were going to be here for a week, I'd tell you about a number of subtleties about this. For example, the inherent sadomasochism of the way we have done this in the past. We submit ourselves too much. We have allowed ourselves to be dominated, to be sheep, to be part of a flock. It's probably not a good metaphor for the 21st century, to be a sheep. So we have to be our own person, and yet we can appreciate these traditions. Not only all the world traditions, the world's religions, but the tradition that maybe you were brought up in or that you practice today. You can also have a religion of your own and still be within one of those traditions. There's no reason why not. Emerson once said, every church has a membership of one. And it's probably true. You know, I would say that every church has a membership of one, and that one is a heretic. Because we all have our ideas about religion that probably goes against the whole theology of our tradition. I mean, we all have our ideas. Ask somebody what they believe, and I'm sure that those, my tradition, the Catholics, the Pope would probably be on your case in no time, because you probably don't think of it the way you're supposed to, because we each are different. And that's fine. We understand we take religion in our own way. But I'm also interested in those young people especially, what the parents tell me, feel that they only have a choice. Their only choice is between the traditions that they know, the institutions, and the fully secular life. The alternative is to live with spiritual practices, with an understanding of how life works, with your own values, as your own system. You can put those together, and you can get a great deal from the religious traditions in support of that. It seems to me that the spiritual and religious traditions of the world have so much to give us, it's inexhaustible. Imagine if you were just going to sit down and seriously meditate on the Buddhist sutras and the Tao Te Ching and the great Sufi poets and the great Christian theologians and mystics over the centuries. I mean, how long would it take you to do all that? It'd take more than a lifetime. And I'm telling you, this is rich and beautiful. It's just that our attitude toward it has been a little bit skewed. I think that we have been persuaded that religion is about dogmatism and moralism, that this is what you should believe, and this is how you should behave, rather than guide you in your own spirituality, in your own spiritual way. So this book that I'm going around speaking about now, A Religion of One's Own, started out 3 years ago as a book based on the work of Henry David Thoreau, because he was somebody who I think quite clearly made up, maybe I shouldn't say it that way, over his lifetime created his own religious forms. Thoreau says very clearly in his books that for him, getting up in the morning was a spiritual practice, just getting up in the morning. He says that taking a bath is a sacrament. He sees that the ordinary life is much more sacred than we normally think of it. So in a way, for him, you don't have to do anything special. You just have to live your life and see that it has sacred roots and a sacred dimension to it. And that seeing is what creates your religion. That's how Thoreau did it. And I also use other examples. I use the example of Georgia O'Keeffe, who did a lot of things that were part of her own religion. One of the things she did was try to find her home, where she should be. She lived in New York City for a while and was productive there, learned a lot. She lived in Lake Placid for a while and lived a fairly interesting life there and accomplished some things. She lived other places as well, and finally ended up in New Mexico, where she discovered her place. She really discovered where she needed to be, and that's when her art really flourished. And what's interesting about her is that she very clearly said that she had no interest in religion, and yet she corresponded with Thomas Merton, the Christian monk. So she was like so many of us who say, I'm not really religious, or I'm not really interested in religion, but it shows that, you see signs of it here and there. She wanted to correspond with these religious teachers. And then when you look at her painting, whatever you think of the quality of it, it's, I would say, quite uneven, and yet she has made some paintings that really seem to reveal to a great many people the sacredness of land, the sacredness of flowers, and of bones. I mean, these are basic things: bones, flowers, land, with a few crosses in there from her New Mexico environment, which she also was aware of and part of her religion. But that was her way. And I think that's very serious. I take seriously when she talks about her art that way. And her art is part of the American religious history, I would say, even though she had nothing to do with organized religion. It's an important part of American religious history. Incidentally, I didn't want to really talk about this, but one of the interesting things to me about her art is that it is obviously so sexual. And she said there was no sex in it. Now, what's going on there? Didn't she see very well, or what? Why couldn't she see the sexuality in her flowers? Well, I think, I believe her when she says that she didn't understand them to be sexual at all. But there's a very interesting connection, very profound connection between sexuality and religion. Very profound. Now, many people have experienced that profundity negatively. So they have found that the religions of their past has been warning them about their sexuality and telling them how to limit it and how it can get away from you and how dangerous it is. But really all it does, it points to the importance of sex, doesn't it? I remember being a kid and having the nuns tell us all so often how not to be sexual, and I wouldn't have thought about it nearly as much if they had kept bringing it up.
It's a case of stuffing beans up the nose, maybe?
There's a way in which you know, when you are negative about something, you're just as involved and engaged in it as when you're positive. I think that has gone on. But I really feel that because these things are so close, that someone like George O'Keeffe could say she didn't intend this to be sexual, but when you present the numinous, you are dealing with sexuality. I think it's just the way it is. Just the way it is, because sex is at the roots of our sense of what is numinous. Otherwise, why have so much trouble too with whether Jesus was married or not? That just came up in the New York Times this week. Did you see that?
No.
You know, Karen King at Harvard have discovered this fragment, a tiny little fragment. Imagine that, little fragment, document like that, what's about a square inch, that talked about Jesus' wife, and the whole world can't sleep at night thinking about it.
What did they say her name was?
Doesn't it say something about the fact that this connection between religion and sexuality is so potent. There's so much power in that. Now, I see it as a therapist. I wish I could tell you directly. It's difficult for me to say publicly, but privately, the people that I have seen over the years, going back 30 years, when I was started out in Texas as a therapist, and I'd have these people come to therapy who were in their 60s and 70s, dealing with the repressed sexuality of their childhood, directly traced to the religion that they grew up with, and having great troubles with it. And in many instances, to the great delight of us, discovering the liberation. I remember one woman in particular in their 60s saying that one day she came to me after several months and she said, "Today I'm going to become a sexual being for the first time in my life." And she said, I should have a party. She said, I'm discovering a part of myself that I've repressed, thinking it was a good thing to hold down, and now no longer. World, look out. That's what she said to me, as they say in Texas. So there is that side to it that is, in all my books I talk about this, the relationship between the spiritual and the sexual, how close they are to each other, almost coming from the same root, passion and mystery. And how important it is to get these two things together so that we can, in this new religion of our own, not the religion of the past, the religion of our own, one of our projects has got to be to resolve our sexuality and our spirituality. If you can't do that, you don't get the whole thing. It's a little bit like George O'Keeffe's flowers. If you can't see the sexuality in them, then you don't quite get the whole thing. There's a great mystery there. Another figure that I use in this book that has been close to me all my life is, I don't know if you've even heard of him, is Glenn Gould, the Canadian pianist. I bump into people around the world in different countries and states. I just did this recently. I bump into a crowd and I find Glenn Gould devotees that are just as fanatical as I am. It's amazing. There are a bunch of us around. He was just an amazing pianist. But he didn't go to church. He was not interested in formal religion. But he said that playing Bach for him he thought it helped him and his audiences discover a life of wonder and serenity. and allowed people to discover their own divinity. I take those words very carefully. I take them theologically. I don't take them as mere shallow metaphors. I think that Glenn Gould was a sort of priest of the piano. He was someone who was able to take this highly spiritual and religious music of Bach and present it in such a way that it just stunned people, stunned them, and brought them to a kind of religion that's not the kind that you go to church for, but it's as religious as anything. And it's a revelation of the divine as anything is, and he saw that. And he expressed it. I also use an example in my book here of a new friend, a friend I met just 2 years ago, whose name is Simona Dinnerstein. Maybe you've heard of her, I don't know. Simona was also one of these people who discovered Glenn Gould. She was a pianist at Juilliard, and she discovered Glenn Gould, and she heard him playing the Bach Goldberg variations, and she was just shocked. She had never heard anything like this before. Never heard this. That's how I felt with him. I never heard that. I never thought music could be like this before. So she discovered there was a teacher in England who could teach her in the general direction of Glenn Gould's approach to the piano. And so she went and studied with her. She came back to the United States, and as a student, there were tons of Juilliard graduates in piano. She financed and then developed her own recording of the Goldberg variations. And in the musical world, it stunned the musical world. It became like an overnight success. And she mentioned somewhere that she sees her playing as helping her audience have a mystical experience. Now, I heard that, and I didn't take it as another one of these metaphors you pop off easily. And I contacted her, and I said, I'd like to talk to you about this. Do you really mean that? And she said, I do. Well, we are now very close friends, and we talk a lot about the relationship between my work, religion and psychoanalysis, and her work at the piano. And we see, we're doing the same thing in some ways. We have a lot to share, a lot to talk about among these things. So what I'm suggesting, too, is that in this new world that we have, we don't have to separate, as Umberto was mentioning earlier, we don't have to separate the secular and the religious, or the secular and the spiritual, at all. You don't have to separate them. When I studied religion at Syracuse University, what I did there, the program was set up so that we could study the world's religions and psychoanalysis, depth psychology, and the arts, especially literature. All as though they were just one thing. No separation between them at all. I remember when I was studying there that we had literature majors coming from the literature departments to study literature with us, because we were doing it in a way that saw the numinous in literature. We could read Hemingway and feel the sacredness in it. For all of Hemingway's own personal neuroses, the sacred came through. We read especially Rilke, Rainer Maria Rilke, Wallace Stevens, Emily Dickinson, Anne Sexton, Sylvia Plath. All of these writers, Samuel Beckett was my favorite, all of these writers who are saying that are contributing to the religious teachings we get in the world's religions. At Syracuse, we had exams we had to take at the end to get your PhD, and they were different areas. We had the general areas, and one was called biblical texts. And I was in my anti-religion phase, anti-Christian phase at that time, and so I didn't want to do biblical texts. I had devoted enough time to the Bible, I thought. Now I feel differently, but I went to my the head of the department, I said, can I do Greek tragedy as my biblical text? And he said, why not? So I did Greek tragedy, again discovering that these Greek tragedies that we think of as art were really theology, spirituality. So this is how I feel now. I feel that there's so much that's available to us for our deep spiritual lives that we consider secular, and so we don't bring that into the realm of our spirituality. And instead we have perhaps too literal, too narrow a notion of what is spiritual and what is religious. So I would like to open that up. To me, it opens up a huge world. I know that this isn't for everybody. I was saying these very things in California in January. I went to Northern California, did a little book tour around Northern California. I was in this small town near the sea there in California. I said these things, and a woman stood up and she said, I came here to be told that reading Hemingway is good for my spiritual life. She said, I'm out of here. She left. So I understand that may not appeal to everybody. You may not quite grasp what I'm trying to say with it, perhaps. But what I'm trying to suggest is that we have a world, we have so many resources that we have looked at wrongly. We have looked at as being only secular when they have sacred roots, and they can feed us. We haven't taught them properly. We teach them, we teach the technicalities, but we don't teach the content. And we don't teach the soul searching that has to go into art and to literature. We don't teach that. We teach it superficially. Like people have told me, they say, when I talk about mythology in my books, they say, I studied mythology in high school and I never knew mythology had anything to do with me. And here we have Jung, James Hillman, so many other fine psychologists writing about using myth as a way to get to our depths. And I studied what they call myth as the religion of the Greeks, who understood that everything we do has a god or a goddess in it, which is to say is profoundly spiritual. So we have a lot of work to do, I think. We have a lot of work to do to mature our spirituality. And what I'm getting at is that if we do this in a way that has a certain character of our own as we do it, like we are maybe, like for me, I have been heavily influenced by Zen Buddhism, and I read the Tao Te Ching every day. Not every day, every week. I read the Tao Te Ching regularly, let's say. But, and I have retranslated the Gospels. They are now at a point where they're very important to me. But somebody else will do it differently. And that's what I'm suggesting, is that this is the time today. Whether you're going to a church or not makes no difference. No matter who you are, it seems to me everybody has the opportunity to have their, in a way of speaking, their own religion. I don't mean something selfish, narcissistic, my thing, not communal. People are often asking, what about community? Well, my experience is, when I begin exploring my religion, I make new friends. I encounter people at a deep level who are doing the same thing in their own way. I'll give you an example. One of my closest friends is a former Dallas Cowboy football player. He's about 6'7". Whenever I'm next to him, I'm looking at his belt buckle. I know his belt buckle very well. And when he stopped playing football, he started exploring volcanoes in the Southwest. It's just something that he felt he had to do. That led him to close relationships with the Native Americans of New Mexico and involvement with their ceremonies and rituals and teachings. And then that led him to an interest in a study of Aztecs and Mayan religion. And he was doing all this. I'm telling you, he's given his whole life to it. And he's a very, very bright man, very, very high IQ guy. And so I get emails from him every day. I got about 3 today. Today he's telling me about these stone circles in Scotland that have to do with, have some relationship to the Mayan calendars. So he's really seriously into it. If anyone has his own religion, it's him. But I tell you what that does, we have a very, very tight connection. And he is connected to a group of other people who are so compelled by all of this. We have a community. It's not the same as going to a building like a church and having ham and eggs. You know, it's not that kind of thing, or pancake breakfast. It's not that. But we have a community of friends that are really dedicated to the religion each of us has as we see it. We bring that together. It's very intense. I'd call that community, religious community. So that's that side of it. Now, I'd like to address especially the students for a moment. I would suggest to you, as someone who has been a therapist for many years, and I've heard a lot of stories. Very, very strange things that we all get into. It's amazing what we get into. Human beings, just amazing. And the trouble we have. And you know, one of the things, there are a couple general principles I think I have learned from doing therapy, and I'd like to share them with you tonight. One of them is that many of our difficulties reduced down to a fear of living. A number of years ago, when I was in college, it was popular to talk about a fear of dying. I think it's a fear of living that causes our difficulties. A fear of being really alive. Of being alive as an individual. See, this is where it connects in with the religion of oneself. A fear of being alive as an individual, living from your soul, from which your life sort of erupts and just comes out, and it's not going to be like anyone else's, and it's not going to fit your plan. You can count on that. If you live from your deep soul, that life coming out of you, it won't fit the structures you've set up, and that's why we're afraid of it. It tends to break structures. So people often have to quit their jobs when they begin living from their soul, because they know the jobs they've had have been soul depriving. They haven't given them their hearts what they needed, so they move on to other jobs. Sometimes relationships fall apart. They do. It'd be nice if they didn't, but they do, because people discover what their heart really needs, and they just can't do it with this person who is moving in another direction. They can't do it. I hope that one of the things we can learn is how to allow each other the space to live our own mystery. I think our relationships would improve immensely. Right now, with over half our marriages falling apart, I think it's probably time to do that. Try something. Try anything new. And one of those new things could be to allow ourselves and the other person to be alive for a change. We're dead. We are dead in so many ways. So coming alive is a big part of this, finding a meaningful way of living. And young people you're trying to find your way, you're trying to find where you should be. There are a lot of people telling you what you should do, but it's so important to trust that deep source of your life, to trust it, and to see what happens when you let it out, and see what it might give you. You have to follow your intuitions, read the signs, and take some chances. And you can do it. But if you take the safe way, Freud said that's a form of death. That's the death principle. So that's where it fits in as well. I would also suggest to young people that if you're living from the soul, from your deep soul, the culture we're in is going to give you some trouble, because we are in a society right now that likes to count things and measure and interpret everything according to materialistic and mechanistic terms. So today a lot of people are persuaded that we understand ourselves through brain studies? I don't think so. Studies of the brain are very important, and neuroscience is very important. I'm working with a man right now who is considered the founder of psychopharmacology and a great neuroscientist. He turned 100 last November. He's become one of my closest friends. I just talked to him today. He's 100. He's got several projects going at once right now. He's a brain person, but he's also a painter. He's an artist. He was always in trouble with his fellow scientists, his fellow brain people, because he had a different point of view on life. He had an artist's point of view on life too, and they didn't like it. I think we are selling ourselves to a materialistic explanation of human life, and that's one of the reasons why religion is suffering today. I've written articles for Huffington Post, and some of the responses to them are saying that. Many of them are saying, we don't need religion. Our secular explanations for life are plenty enough, and they're reliable. We don't need any kind of religion. I don't buy that. I think we are deeper people than that. We are not just materialistic. How can you have hope in life if you just see yourself as an organ, as a brain on legs? How can how can you do it? I don't know. So I would recommend to the young people too that if you do take your soul as your main concern, that your soul needs certain things that are absolutely essential, that our world doesn't necessarily consider essential. For example, you need an experience of nature regularly. You need the natural world. You need it somehow. And it's not just for your physical being, not just because your body needs it, your soul needs it. You also need the arts. The arts are more important than the mechanical sciences for you. Not that they're not important, have their own importance, but I would say in my school, the arts would be much more important than other things. The arts are important for the soul. They nurture the soul. They make you into a being, a person who is a human being. So if I were you, I would suggest really learning how to live with the arts. Live with the arts as a serious part of life. Imagine that. Really a serious part of life. Get to know an art, more than one art. Get to know the arts. Make it part of your practice. And if I may say, as I started out, I wanted to tell you, I never say this, but I wanted to tell you, cultivate some interest and some familiarity with classical music. I want to make a little push for that. I never have done that before, all these years, but tonight I want to do it because I was thinking today, that I understand it's in your mission here at this college. I read the mission statement, and I understand and I agree completely that your taste in the arts is individual and it should be cultivated individually. I completely subscribe to that. And I try to do that for myself, not just be limited. But there's something about classical music, so-called classical music, that gets right to the very heart of who you are. It requires a certain maturity of attention. Like the best of the visual arts, it requires a certain seriousness of attention. And therefore your participation, it touches parts of you that other arts can't. They can't do it. And therefore it would not be a bad idea for you as you develop your meaningful life, as you go out to have a life that is satisfying in so many ways. I'm telling you, if you could develop a taste in classical music, it would help you. It would help you move along. Goes hand in hand with a way of being able to live with visual arts too, to live with them. And it's a skill. I can't talk about this tonight. It's a huge topic all by itself. But when I go to art museums to speak, I often speak against art education. I'm sorry. But only in that sense of the education that doesn't allow a person to see how to live with art rather than just understand it. To live with art, live with visual art. I mean, after all, the example I like to give is that, isn't it tempting when you go to an art gallery or museum to quickly take a look at the little index card that tells you what the painting is about or who the painter is and when they lived and all that? I think if we're going to do that kind of art, what we should do, I'd like to set up my own museum where all we have are index cards. It'd be so much easier. You know, we'd figure it out right away. You wouldn't have to bother with those images. Just go and figure it out and see what this artist is doing. How interesting that this person came from Barcelona and is making this part of, influenced by so-and-so. How great that is. But then we don't have to, deal with that mystery of the painting. But what do we do with paintings anyway? We don't, when you get a painting in your house, hopefully you do that with some regularity. You get a new painting in your house, what do you do with it? Do you call in an expert to tell you what it means? I don't think so. What you do is you hang it there somewhere where you will be living with it probably for all the rest of your life, and maybe your children will live with it too. I know our kids are in their early 20s. They've already chosen the paintings they want to steal from us for their house. It's going to go on and on. Timeless. This is the point, I think, the point of art. We live with it, and we are transformed by it over years. But in America, modern America, it's difficult. It's difficult for us generally to appreciate that. In other countries, when you have a new painting in a family or in a town or a society, there are processions, flowers, food given to the painting. There's a painting I know in Florence, in a church there called the Santissimo Annunziata. If you want to see this painting, you come at a certain time and it rises up out of the floor. I mean, it's great. It's not a great painting, but there it is, coming up out of the floor. And at least it lets you know, that this painting is honored. And there's nobody giving lectures on this painting. I've never saw any whiff of lectures on this painting. It's a presence, and it's something you go to see. You go to see. So that's my suggestion. This is obviously what I'm saying to you tonight, going on and on and on. There are two things, I just want to sort of summarize it. There are two things. One is to think about how you might shape your spiritual practices and understandings in a way that are really tailor-made to you, however you relate to a religious tradition. That's the religion of one's own. As a way of being religious in the coming decades instead of becoming secular. There's a funny way in which established religions are in collusion with this secular life. They kind of keep it going. This religion of your own would not do that, because you would feel the sacred. You'd be dedicated to making your life sacred. And the other thing is to bring the arts seriously into your life and to bring nature seriously into your life. All I'm doing is repeating what Emerson and Henry David Thoreau and Emily Dickinson did and said. They did these things. Emily Dickinson, her family went to church. She says in one of her letters, "My family go to church, but I'm a pagan." She says she's a pagan. And yet she wrote these poems that are all highly spiritual poems. And she lived as a monk, wearing white. Some people thought she was because she was neurotic. I don't think so. I think it was because she was highly spiritual. She had a religion of her own. She was solitary, as many monks are, as many mystics are. She was solitary. You know the story where a friend comes over to visit her, and she wants to give this friend a gift, so she dangles it on a string down from her upstairs bedroom. She won't even get close to her friend. Monks do that. There are people who are honored as saints who do that, do things like that. So I just recommend to you that you consider that this a bit of a shift, and it's not the American way. I understand it's not the usual American way, but it is rooted in America. It's as American as Emily Dickinson and Thoreau and Emerson and their friends are. It's as American as that. I talk about these things in Europe, and I talk about to them as an American spirituality. And they are interested in it because they never thought of American spirituality. But it's ours. It's ours. It's our way. So, if you, can we talk together for a little while? Great. Can we have do you have any questions or comments about all this? Yes.
Say something about texting.
Texas?
Texting. Texting, not sexting. Texting.
Texting.
Yes,
We're
sexting.
not going to talk about texting.
Beats me.
Tell me what you mean. What is, do you have a gripe or what?
People whose communication has evolved into sending little text messages to each other as a matter of communication,
Yeah.
which is pervasive. Sometimes you can be with someone and don't realize they're doing it, and if you mention it, they, well, I'm sending whatever. Hi, how are you? I'm here with another friend.
Well, I don't know. I love email myself. It's my favorite form of communication because I can write. I'm a writer. And we can do it immediately. It's really so great. And we can do it endlessly. I love it myself. I guess I might get caught up in it too much. And I know in our family we do some texting. And once in a while it's true, you know. My wife and I do this email. We put our little computers on our dining room table. And my daughter, who is 22, comes in and says, "What is wrong with you? Can't we just have a breakfast without having all this technology around?" We tell her it's supposed to be the other way around. We're supposed to be telling you that.
Yeah, you think it's
So I think that we do have extremes, and we are getting unconscious, and we're losing some of our contact with each other. But I don't think the reason we don't look at each other and have deep conversations is because we're texting all the time. Maybe we're texting all the time because we've lost that sense of conversation, how important it is. I do a little texting, and I do a lot of email work, but boy, the main thing is the, eye-to-eye, body-to-body conversations and meetings. So maybe what you can do, I'll tell you what, I have this theory. It comes from the painter, Edward Burne-Jones. I call it the Burne-Jones effect. Burne-Jones worked with William Morris. Do you know William Morris? William Morris wallpaper? William Morris was like you. He looked around and said, "This world is getting way too modern for me. I don't like this, what's happening. We're losing our humanity." So he started making wallpaper. I can imagine. It's a wonderful solution because, instead of developing a theory, he developed incredible dyes to put on your wall. And even today we still use William Morris designs in our wallpaper. And so Burne-Jones, his partner in all this, was a painter. Burne-Jones said, "For every new device that science makes, I will paint an angel." That's a solution. So you don't have to say, "Get that technology out of my life." For every text you do something eye to eye. Do something tangible. Make a point of it. And I think it'll work out okay eventually. I was at the Mayo Clinic a few years ago giving a talk at Grand Rounds in Minnesota there at the Mayo Clinic. And after my talk, a surgeon came up to me and he said that what he does, every time they bring a new machine into the operating room, he buys a rug, a beautiful rug, like a Persian rug, some Indian rug. He makes a point of it. I call that the Burne-Jones effect. For every advance in science, you paint an angel. For every new device, you get a rug, or you get a tapestry, you get a painting. You buy something nice to wear, a really special texture. And if it's a particularly bad instrument you're dealing with in texting, or a real smartphone that's too smart, then you get a really good rug, you know, something really special to offset. You have to really offset the impact of that. Anything else? I can give you another brilliant solution.
Did you look into, in your new book, talk about Walt Whitman?
Yes. Oh, I did. Yeah, I do talk about Walt Whitman. Yeah, the body electric is what I cite in this new book. And what about him?
Well, just when you were talking Emerson and Thoreau. And
Yeah,
I thought,
include Whitman, absolutely, because Whitman not only has the ideas, but he can bring that blood and passion into his writing. He lets you know that words can be full of electricity. That's his word. It can be electric. And that's quite an achievement, to be able to use language in such a way that it is full of blood and spark and fire and sex. He's very sexual in what he does. You know, he's an example of what I was saying earlier about sexuality and religion. I think that he is an antidote to the tendency for us to flatten out language in our mechanized world. We flatten out language. We talk in ways that really don't have any blood in them. Even don't we talk to each other that way? I mean, married people talk that way to each other. You're codependent, you know, and you're psychologically deprived, and your childhood didn't have enough touch in it. And when you were born, all this stuff, right out of the magazines and books, right out of Science magazine or something. And that's how we talk to each other, isn't it? A lot of people today are talking to each other that way instead of Walt Whitman style. Read some Whitman and get some the body electric. Get it in there. I bet that would help a lot of marriages, a lot of relationships. Yes.
What you said about classical music and encouraging people, do you think it's possible that what classical music does for you, Aboriginal drumming could do for someone else? Like that it doesn't have to be classical music?
Oh, no, of course. I was hoping I got that idea across, that I didn't mean to say that there's only one way or this is better. I really don't mean that. I'm just saying that nobody speaks for classical music. And I want people speak for drumming. How many people are drumming today? I just did a weekend retreat, just ended last night at Cropalo in Lenox, and there's drumming all weekend long in the room next to me. I had, you know, the whole place was hopping with drumming. I think we're pretty well set with drumming.
How about guitars?
But I don't think that generally Americans appreciate the depth and the value of being able to listen to classical music. That's all I'm saying. I personally think that half of classical music is not worth listening to, and I've studied music all my life. It's not that, I don't think it's all great, but there is enough of it that is so special and remarkable that you owe it to yourself to be able to enter that particular area of imagination that is not accessible anywhere else. This idea I get from my friend and mentor, James Hillman, not about classical music, although he was interested in it. But the idea that certain experiences take us to specific areas of the imagination that we need to excite and bring alive. He said that depression brings us to a particular place in imagination that we need. I'm saying classical music brings us to a special place in imagination. And that's better than depression. You know what I mean? It's a particular area, it's a kind of art that can take us to these places that are, I think, of a particularly subtle and mature place in us that wakens and excites that element in us as people. So it's a kind of therapy, music therapy in a way. It's not just entertainment, it actually wakens the soul, that particular kind. Now I could talk to you all night about Celtic music too, or other kinds of music. We could have a whole week workshop on tango, I'm sure. We could do, there's so much that excite parts of the imagination that are also important. I'm just saying, as someone who happens to love classical music, that I want to put my 2 cents in for that. Yes, sir.
So there's an artificial split between secular and religious, spiritual,
Yes.
that our culture defines for us. But when you highlight particular composers, poets, visual artists that you bring into your religion,
Right.
don't you designate them as these are sacred authors for me? I mean, we do still set up
Oh, secular and a sacred?
yeah,
By selecting those?
by selecting ones that speak to you.
I don't get that. I don't get it, because I think what I'm saying is that I am giving you maybe my, the ones that take me somewhere that's important, that reveal the sacred to me are these particular writers. But there are so many that I don't know. There are so many from other cultures that I have not explored nearly enough that would also do it. So I don't know where that division is. I don't know if there's a dividing line. It's just a matter of what speaks to you. This is where your religion comes in.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
But that's not between sacred and secular. Like, we're all sacred then. In my ideal world, if we followed our own genius, our own individual capacity for these things, individually, our own taste, spiritual taste and artistic taste, that we would have a fully spiritualized, sacred world, because everybody would have a way to do that. But as it is now, we have made church or synagogue or something, we put it there, and then we put the secular world here, and everything else, I guess there's something in between, but it's a divided, bifurcated world that doesn't work. So many ways. Way back there, please.
Okay, I'm not quite sure how to phrase this concisely, but I agree with everything you're saying, and I live my life also trying to cultivate the sacred and have a relationship like that. And a particular challenge I'm having right now is cell phone towers, which is a different subject than texting or communication, because they're putting one up in Putney pretty soon.
Yeah.
And I'm a very sensitive person, and I'm always trying to cultivate those subtle energies that you're talking about. And
Right.
so a lot of people don't even notice cell phone towers, but to me it's a very harsh, violent, chaotic energy that gets put out into our
Right.
town, and I'm having a hard time walking my spiritual path and keeping my inner peace when I'm around those things, and knowing that it's going to be coming to our town is very disturbing to me, and I'm wondering if you have any wisdom to share about that.
I don't know. If I have anything to say, I don't think I like it. I don't know. I do see that we could allow our technology to get away from us, and it could definitely interfere with with what we need for our spirituality. There's no question about that. So if we need nature and we're degrading nature, the result is not only that we don't have raw materials for our continuing materialistic world, but we don't have the things we need for our spiritual lives either. Nobody talks about that as far as I can see. I never hear that. That if we lose these trees, we're losing the source of our spirituality. It's not just losing raw material to build houses or whatever. We are losing these trees that teach us our spirituality, or that are our companions, that point toward the infinite or the source of life, or whatever you want to call it. So nature plays this important role to be an intermediary between us and the mysteries of that are part of our experience. So in that regard, generally speaking, we have to be cautious and careful. We can easily go too far. We are going too far. We're degrading our whole earth that way. We have a view of the earth as material to be used for what we want materially. And I think it's because, this goes back to my main point here, our religion so far has not motivated us in that direction. Because, the churches have been very worried about how you behave sexually. They're very worried about it. They're not worried about how we behave toward the earth. They have not been worried about it. Maybe they're getting a little bit better in places, but generally speaking, in our history, they have not been worried about it. So we get this little message that Jesus was married, and people go into a fit. Then we have on the same page, it was in fact the same page today in the New York Times, saying that climate change is losing the battle. Now the UN has just come out with a report, climate change is really much worse than we thought. Nobody's excited about that. The churches aren't having meetings and gatherings to talk about it. But they will get foam at the mouth telling you about your sexuality. What is this? It's like a selective ethics. So yes, I think in that general way then, we are degrading our spiritual life, and that's what you're complaining about. I would, if I were you, if that's part of your religion, and it sounds to be, it sounds that it should be, that it is, I'd do whatever possible to find a way to reconcile that. The question you have to ask yourself is, do you want to use a cell phone? You know, do you want your neighbors to use one? You know, because what happens, it's a tough thing. I go to these meetings. I happen not to be a vegetarian, and I'm surrounded by vegetarians, and they give me lectures all the time. You know, I'm lectured constantly on their morality, and if you want to, I think you got to be careful with that. So we have to find a way to get what we need for ourselves. And we may not be able to change the world for everybody to get that. But we have to do it. We can make our complaints and we can adjust our lives so that we have what we need for our spirituality. And a lot of people over the centuries have done that. They've gone to different parts of the world where they can live out their spirituality. You may have to consider that. Where are we, Jeff? How long are we going here? Midnight or what?
2 more questions.
2 more questions. I love this. We have 2 more questions. Great. Yes, sir, right there.
Yeah, you spoke a lot, or you spoke briefly about the how religion is too dogmatic and moralistic. And I was wondering, do you still think in a modern society there's a role for universal morals that, regardless of individual religious?
That there are some universal morals besides besides just our individual idea of what's moral?
And going beyond like what's simply written in the law.
Besides what's written in what?
In the law, like.
In the law?
Yeah.
Yes. I see. In my view, if we really take seriously this individual, our own taking responsibility, that part of our religious life, to really take responsibility for it and to develop it, cultivate it thoughtfully and intelligently, and not just go around superficially tasting different traditions, but actually exploring things really seriously, trying to get answers to our questions, really doing it with a lot of conviction and heart and thought. If we do that, I don't worry that we are going to be an immoral people. I don't think we will be. And I mean, it's my view that we will find a morality that will be good for us all. Now, there may be some differences in what we emphasize and what we don't emphasize, but it seems to me, I trust that. I trust that if we explore it together and we are in conversation with each other, we will be better off than following a set of rules that have come down to us from outside of our own quest, our own search for those things. I think that they will be more deep-seated, ultimately more effective. That's what I was just saying about the fact that the churches have been rather neurotically focused on sexuality as a big moral issue. Yes, it could have a moral issue like anything else, but why this obsession with it? And at the neglect of many other moral issues that are not even considered. So I think we'd be better off. We're better off going this way that I'm suggesting than we were in the past. The other way did not work. We are not a more moral society because of it. We aren't. We simply aren't. Now, some people say, what happens when I don't have someone to tell me what's right or wrong? Well, maybe you got to start living your own life now. And you'll discover that you have to find your values and discover what's going to work and what isn't. and live in community with people and face tough, tough moral decisions. You know, with the churches, you could go and work for a corporation that's destroying the planet. With your own morality, maybe your own moral conscience won't let you do that. So I think it's a more demanding morality when you get away from that universal, off-the-rack version. I don't know what, can we do two more? We have two hands up.
You didn't go this far in talking about the church, but I keep thinking of your remark about fear of living.
Fear of living.
And what struck me at first was that maybe it's a fear of criticism and judgment that I perceive, and I was thinking, historically that's probably been present, but maybe it's stronger now than ever before. It just seems harsh that people there's many prevalent attitudes toward being disapproving.
Yes.
Whether you're the president or whether
Right.
you're Putin or...
Right.
But do you connect this also to the church as fear of living and also of
Sure.
doctrine and bossiness?
Sure, sure. I mean, I don't want to be against churches. I don't feel that. As I said, I think there's so much there in the churches for us. But the way we have done it, this submission to a church and the loss of our own engagement with it, and seeing that we have to, ultimately we are on our own here. I'm not the first person to say this. Thomas Merton, a great monk, Christian monk, toward the end of his life, for years he had wanted to go to Asia to talk to Asian monks about contemplation and meditation. Finally, his abbot let him go. He went over to Thailand, eventually made his way to Thailand after going to several other places. He gave a talk one afternoon where he said, we can no longer rely on the institutions. We are on our own. He says, brother, we are on our own. And he said that now is the time that we have to make our own decisions, etc., etc. He left that talk, went into his room, and was electrocuted. He died. He died minutes after saying that we are on our own. I always felt that was a real punctuation to that sentence, to that statement. This is his last word. This great, great thinker, who really lived his own life. And people complain. I know people who knew him that tell me that I shouldn't say things too positive about Thomas Merton because he gave his religious order such grief and trouble. That's because he lived his own religion within that thing. He was one of the strictest monks that ever existed, and yet he lived his own religion. He lived his own religion. You read him, and he did it, and then at the very end, at the last talk he ever gave in his life, he told everybody, brother, we're on our own. We can no longer live with these institutions the way we have. It's over. And I think that statement rings in my mind. And he's not the only one who said that. Joseph Campbell said something very similar. Other people have said that. And I'm just saying it again, too. Emerson discovered that harshly. He went to Harvard Divinity School, and he wanted to be a minister, and he became a minister, and he couldn't stand it. And he left it, arguing over the nature of religion. And one of the things he says, he gave his Harvard divinity school address to a few people, a dozen people, I guess, in Harvard. He was never invited back. 30 years later, he was invited back to Harvard. And he said there that, first of all, he said we don't need to reform the church. We need soul, soul, and more soul, he said. And then he said, I have to leave the ministry in order to become a minister. And he left then and began giving his talks, creating his own religion, being a minister in his own church, essentially. He didn't give a name to it or anything, he just did it. That's a pretty good model. I like that model. And I recommend it. He didn't become less religious. I would say he became more religious. We have one more question here, and then we have to stop.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about, as we start to kind of reach levels of overpopulating our planet, how do we go about maintaining our spiritual level and individual individual spirituality when so many individual spiritualities come about?
Oh, well, but think about all the other planets that have life on them. I assume we have billions and billions of planets with billions of people on them, so the numbers don't worry me, really. It's the, if I understand you correctly, the thing to do, I think, is we have to appreciate really the preciousness of each individual life. And that its absolute uniqueness, no matter how many of us there are. It's a great mystery of human life. That we are all so individual and have our own individual lives, so profound, so complex. Just think all these years we've lived, whatever age you are, all the years you've lived and all that has happened, that is all part of you. It's so mysterious and complex. So I think appreciating that individuality is one thing. Really appreciating, giving it its place. And another way of looking at it too is that sometimes people talk about community as being such a big thing. I'm not terribly big on community, sorry. I know it's big in Vermont, isn't it? I just feel that getting people together, like we have done in the churches, that kind of gathering people together, has been more a collective of people who think alike and subscribe to the same basic principles. I don't call that a community. To me, a community is an individual who is full of this incredibly complex, mysterious individuality. It's very rich. It's very big, vast. And we put that with a group. You get that with one other person, you already have, like in marriage, you have an impossible combination of worlds, huge worlds there. That now you get a group of people in a room. What do you have? It's incalculable what that is. But each individual is rich and important. And to me, a community is a gathering of these worlds. It's not a gathering of people who subscribe to the same thing. You call that a community? I wouldn't. I'd call it a collective of groupthink, something everyone's supposed to think alike. I don't see the value in it. I really don't. I do see the value in people who have worked out their own lives with this deeply and ethically and engage the mystery of their lives and can live from their open hearts with other people and have a community that way. That is pretty good, I would say. So I don't care how many people we have. The more the merrier, in a way, because we have our individuality. So it's the problem of the one and the many. It's that old philosophical problem. One and the many. So there's no resolution to it. There's no answer. But if we can hold it in our minds at the same time, that this one individual has such richness and is so important, and then we have other individuals, equally so, the many, and somehow that comes together, and that's where we are. That's the best place to be. We don't have to reduce that in any way. Let's just enjoy our differences, be together with our differences, our individual path, journey, genius, ethics, and I think we'd be better off. Thank you for being with me tonight.